This is Mr. Anderson from Kellogg Community College. We are going to be taking a look at the second part of Chapter 2, Section 6. We're going to do a little emphasis here on some of the phase shifting, which is a horizontal shift on trigonometric graphs. And we're looking at sine and cosine on this page. So let's get started. We're going to be doing 4 graphs in this video, starting off with 3 sine of 3x minus pi. So our A is going to be 3, and the absolute value of 3 is 3, so our amplitude is 3. Our omega is going to be 3, and our phi is pi. So what we'll do here is first graph y equals 3 sine of x. So what this does for me is it kind of lets me see the 2 cycles of this graph, like so. And for my next piece, which is going to work with the omega of 3, I'm going to focus on this first interval right here, which is going to be pi over 2. And it's going to be at pi over 2 comma 3. Now, the reason why I look at that is because I'm going to apply this speed change, this horizontal shift to the problem here, horizontal, this is going to be a stretch or shrink to the problem, which is going to make this graph move 3 times as fast. So this is 4 pi over here, all the way on the right side, 4 pi comma 0. So this is going to go 3 times faster. So what I'm going to do is take my first interval, which was at pi over 2, and divide by my omega. So my pi over 2 divided by 3 is the same thing as multiplying by 1/3, which means that now every single tick mark on this graph right here is going to be pi over 6 units wide. And that's kind of important because I can count by those pi over 6 and get the new locations for my 2 cycles of this graph. Now I, again, prefer to choose this picture here, and again, it's not going to look 3 times faster than the picture on the left, but what it will do is it will give me my 2 cycles and let the points actually do the work of the problem. So this is going to be pi over 6 comma 3. This is 2 pi over 6, or pi over 3 comma 0. This would be this is pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6, or pi over 2 comma negative 3. And so 1 pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6, 4 pi over 6, which is 2 pi over 3 comma 0. So that's 4 pi. This is 5 pi over 6 comma 3. And then 6 pi over 6, which is the same thing as pi comma 0. And then 7 pi over 6 comma negative 3. And then finally at the end, 8 pi over 6, or 4 pi over 3 comma 0. Sorry, that got a little cramped in there. But now what we will do is we will take our third graph here, because this second graph was y equals 3 sine 3x. And now what we will do is we will apply our phase shift. To apply the phase shift, we have to take our phi and divide it by our omega. Our phi in the problem is pi. And our omega in the problem is 3. So this becomes our phase shift. It's a phase shift to the right, pi over 3 units, because the subtraction, we don't have to modify this pi at all. Its base is set up as a subtraction problem. So pi over 3 units is 2 intervals along the x-axis. So what that means is we're going to start this blue graph on this dot instead of at the origin. So we will move up and down and make our first cycle of sine like so. Then our second, well, basically half of the second cycle is right there. And this also would mean that if we were to go back before this, here's your piece right there. So this is going to be 0, 0, the origin. And so we now use our points in the intervals here. So instead of this being, because on the previous picture, this is pi over 6 comma 3, well, this would be pi over 6 comma negative 3. This is going to be like in the previous picture, pi over 3 comma 0. This here is going to be pi over 2 comma negative 3. I'm only indicating my new points if they were different than the last picture here. This is 2 pi over 3 comma 0. This down here is 5 pi over 6 comma negative 3. Then pi comma 0. And then this is 7 pi over 6 comma negative 3, or positive 3 in this case, not negative 3. And then finally 4 pi over 3 comma 0. For our second of 4 pictures, I am going to take a look at this cosine graph. What we're going to have here in this case is we're going to have, like the previous a value before, we're still going to go from 3 to negative 3. And we are also going to double the speed instead of triple the speed. So this will get to its second cycle in much less space than 4 pi. If it goes there in half the time, it should technically get here by 2 pi. We'll take a look at that in the second picture. And then we'll shift things over by the, in this case, our phi will be a negative pi. So things are going to get a little bit interesting here. So let's start off with what cosine would look like. Starts at 3 and then moves down to the bottom to complete our first cycle right there. So there's our first cycle of cosine. And then our second cycle would do this. Now, important things to note, this first interval right here, this is going to be pi over 2, just like it has been in the previous problem. And it's going to be at 0, pi comma 2 comma 0. So since this graph is y equals 3 cosine of x, our second graph is going to be y equals 3 cosine of 2x. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our pi over 2, and we're going to divide it by our omega, and our omega in this case is 2, but instead of dividing by 2, we're going to multiply by 1/2. So pi over 2 times 1/2 is going to be 1/4. So every single unit, even though the picture is going to look exactly the same as before, every single unit is half as big because we're going twice as fast, raising the pitch of a note in similar fashion. There we go. So it's the same picture, but instead of this being pi over 2 comma 0, this is pi over 4 comma 0. And we're still starting at 0 comma 3 here. This down here at the bottom, since we're moving by pi over 4, this is 2 pi over 4, or pi over 2 comma negative 3. This would be 3 pi over 2, or 3 pi over 4 comma 0. And this would be 4 pi over 4 or pi, comma 3. Then this would be 5 pi over 4, comma 0. 6 pi over 4, which is the same thing as 3 pi over 2, comma negative 3. Then 7 pi over 4, comma 0. And then finally 8 pi over 4, which is the same thing as 2 pi, comma 3. So there is my answer to the problem, because if this normally is 4 pi, which it is if I use that, this would be 2 pi here for one cycle, 4 pi for 2 cycles. We do the entire 2 cycles in half the time because we doubled the speed. So what we're going to do now is we're going to work with the phase shift. Now the phase shift is phi doesn't look very good, phi divided by omega. In this case, my phi is negative pi. And it's negative pi because you take it from this problem, and since you have to have a subtraction, this would be a negative pi for my phi, all over my omega, which is 2. So I have to move this graph to the left pi over 2 units. So that is a full shift of this graph 2 tick marks to the left. Now what you may notice is that I'm going to start this tick mark here, since we have to move this graph 2 units to the left, this tick mark is going to start way down there. So low, medium, high, medium, low. That's the start of the problem. And then here's another cycle, low, medium, high, medium, low. So you see I've got 2 cycles here to finish my problem. So there's going to be some changes here because this is going to be, the starting point is going to be opposite the starting point here. The starting point was 0, 3. This is 0, -3. These points are the same though. So I'm not going to label them, but I will label these points that are different. Pi over 2, -3. This is the same as before. This is going to be pi, -3. Whoa, whoa, whoa. What did I do here? This should be a +3. Sorry about that. And then way up here, this is going to be 3 pi over 2, 3. And then down here at the bottom at that spot, this is going to be 2 pi, -3. All right, halfway through, and it's time for us to move on to our final two problems here. All right, so we're going to take a look at, there we go, I think we can fit these on the same screen here. Okay, so what we have here is we have -2 cosine of 2x minus pi over 2. So what this is going to be is, again, speeding up this graph twice as fast, except we're going to start our cosine not in our usual spot. We're going to start it down here at -2, because our a value is negative in this case. Our amplitude would be 2, but since our a value is negative, we're going to start down here. Again, being careful here, we're going to go low, medium, high, medium, low, medium, high, medium, low. There's our 2 cycles of cosine. And before we get into working with our omega, our most important point is this first interval right here, pi over 2, 0. Now we're going to double the speed here again. So since we just did a problem like that, I will kind of gloss over a little bit of that process, because we would take our pi over 2 and divide it by 2, which is the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. So this is going to be, like in the previous problem, pi over 4. So this right here is going to be pi over 4, 0. And this would be pi over 2, 3. And then this would be 3 pi over 4, 0. This would be pi, -3. All right, we're still moving on and on. So we would then go to the next phase here. Oh, shoot, you know, I accidentally put 3's instead of 2's, so let me change that to a 2. Let me change this to a 2. Sorry about that. I was kind of used to the problems that we've been doing so far, which have all been, you know, like 3's. All right, so then we have pi, then we have, since we're moving by quarter units, this is 5 pi over 4, 6 pi over 4, 3, 7 pi over 4, 3, and then 8 pi over 4, 3, which is going to be 2 pi, -2. All right, so for our next graph here, we are going to now look at phi, and phi divided by omega. This is going to be our phase shift here. So we take our pi over 2, and that will be divided by our omega, which is 2, which brings us to this idea, pi over 2 divided or multiplied by 1 over 2, because we're not going to divide by 2. So this is going to move to the right pi over 4 units, which means that this whole graph just moves one little shift tick mark to the right. So I'm going to start this lowest point here, but I'm going to start it here instead. Low, medium, high, medium, low. There's my first cycle. Medium, high, medium. So you can see that I now have almost 2 cycles like so, but I need this little piece right here I'm adding to the left. So everything gets moved basically one tick mark to the right, which changes my points a lot. That's probably why I didn't spend a lot of time plotting these points, knowing that these all would change. So this is the origin. This is going to be down here. This is going to be pi over 4, -2, and then pi over 2, 0. So this is 1/4, 2/4, 3 pi over 2, or 3 pi over 4, excuse me, 2. And then finally we get pi, 0. And then we have 5 pi over 4, -2. 3 pi over 2, which is the same thing as 6 pi over 4, 0. And 7 pi over 4, 2. That should look like a 7. And then finally 8 pi over 4, which is 2 pi, comma